Oh, shit, Abe.
What?
Oh, God.
Oh,
I did it again.
What did you do,
What
man?
movie did you watch for this? What were we supposed to watch?
I watched 1998's Rushmore. What did you watch?
Oh, I watched Rushmore,
Oh, my God.
where Eddie
this
Murphy
bit.
drinks a potion and it gets a big giant tushy.
Oh, my God. He gets a tushy that's too big?
Yeah, and he lives in a
Are there-
mountain in South Dakota carved in the shape of a giant tush.
Oh, my God.
It's
like,
really sad.
He's got a tushy lair. I bet he has hijinks because his tushy's too big, I bet.
But I could wing it. I could talk Rushmore. I have seen it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, cool. Then
All
let's
right.
do that.
How's that opening bit wearing on you? You like that still?
I absolutely hate it, but you know what? I'm here to be supportive. Like so many of our characters in this film probably would have been better if they've just been, loved a little bit more and walked through life. But that's just me.
All right. Well, King's a King always starts with an improvised song. And this is always going to start with that. Whatever that is.
No, I got it.
Unless we think of something better. So we'll see.
I love it.
I wanted to avoid because the last one really worked, but then everyone was predicting that I would just do the simple transposition and it would be Mushroar about a lion made of mushrooms or fungus or something.
Right,
and I wanted to
right.
circumvent that. So
Here's
that's
the
where
thing.
I went with it.
As long as I've known you, when they expect you to zig, you've always zagged. So
I'm a contrarian.
I think if you want to keep doing this bit, I think you're going to best our comment section. And I set that up as a challenge. I actually think that they could come at you and you'd be fine.
You're encouraging them to come at me. Great.
Yeah.
This is Anders Sons. I'm Michael Swaim.
I'm Abe Epperson.
And we'll be discussing the works of both PT and Wes Anderson. This time it's a Wes.
Hey, 98. We're kind of doing a chronological bit, but we're switching between the two. There it is. Rushmore. You remember this film. Basically everyone's seen it, but we're going to dissect it as you'd expect from a show like this that does a deep dive at an atomic level. So get strapped in for that.
And just so we can follow like our character arcs, Abe, we covered bottle rockets, and I believe I started that episode by saying, oh, maybe because Abe historically is not as into Wes Anderson as PT. That's at least fair to say, right?
That's fair. Yeah.
And I was like, I do see problems with bottle rockets and see previous episode, but yeah, I still do. But Abe, I really, really like Rushmore. It's very, very good.
I definitely put it in the top 2 that I've seen. I have not seen all of the Wes Andersons.
Okay.
I put it in the top 2. It's definitely the best of it. I still think that there's legacy problems that I have, but this is the most suited.
I'm pretty excited about it.
I'll
Black hair,
why.
oval face.
I'll try to explain why I think that this is less like
egregious
of an issue for me.
Sure.
And I know this is all my hangups. Just enjoy films, Abe. Hey, why can't you just enjoy toys? They're made for you to enjoy. What's going on? The reason is because I'm a filmmaker. No, just,
oh God.
Yeah, no. I just had
I was blown back from the microphone. By pretension.
No, the reason is just because it never really suited my sentimentality. Like the things that he focuses on, I just don't care much.
Sure.
Yeah, it's my palate. Yeah, like I don't know, man. I don't like. I feel like if we were to have a conversation at a party, he's just one of the people I'd be like, I don't think we're gonna vibe. But that's all. He still makes films that are like well crafted and all that. I've said this much in the last episodes, but that's like my caveat for this episode. So you're gonna get someone who loves it. You're gonna get someone who doesn't like the guy, but thinks this is probably one of his better films.
Sure.
Here we go.
And correct me if I'm wrong. We return to the Spectra formula, or am I being thrown off by Tragedy of Macbeth?
No. It's the same as Coen Brothers. So we have diegesis,
that's right.
pedagogy, and howdy do that.
Okay, we're doing it through the 3 spectra, huh?
Yeah, that's how we do this film.
There was holidays, there was a big gap, but I'm back in it.
Well, it's because the middle one, the Stephen's King. That is the one that we decided to name him different. All right, enough of that.
All right. So this film opens with a family portrait in front of red curtains. The portrait, I think, notably has Murray as Bloom's, what's his name? Howard Bloom?
Herman Bloom.
Herman Bloom, smoking a cigarette. And then the curtains part to reveal the grimy Rushmore sign. This is going to be too slow, Abe, so hop in if you can do it more efficiently. But
but I think it is important to point out so we don't have to do it every time.
Yeah.
There is a literal curtain in this film that does, I believe it's 5
it's a notable
times.
maneuver. Yeah.
Yeah, it's every time it like goes to, all right, October, December, or like the end or Rushmore. So he's definitely setting, which I do think is important for later. He's setting up the system of proscenium, of performance, the theater. We'll explain exactly in the next section why we think that is. Why? Because it comes from this long pedigree of films doing that. Theater. There's kind of for people who aren't like, who don't like surround themselves around, some of that as much. There's like there's a reason to do that, and it says something to people because people have been doing it for literally 100 years. But really, the film starts in math class where a kid is asking about an equation on a wall that is, and the teacher says it's never been solved.
It. Yeah.
No mathematician, and if it is solved, you get an A forever. In fact, the whole class would get an A forever. And so the teacher brings it upon himself to ask Max, who we were introduced. That's Jason Schwartzman, Max Fisher, the main character Rushmore. He's like, do you want to try?
He's introduced as a badass. He sips tea, folds his newspaper down
in an ornate,
strains his school jacket,
porcelain cup. Yeah. God, I hate it.
Teacher tosses him the chalk. He snatches it out of the air. Flute trills in the soundtrack.
And then he Good Will Huntings this shit.
Yeah, he solves it. Teacher says,
it's as if Good Will Hunting, it's like, of all the brains, it came from a janitor. It's like, no, in this one, it's like the guy that everyone was like, this guy will solve that equation.
And he does.
Everyone does it. He dunks the chalk more or less. Everyone goes crazy. He solves the equation. And then we realize it's a dream. He's actually in a chapel, and he's listening to Herman Bloom speak.
Bill Murray. Speak. He tells them that they're lucky to go to Rushmore, and sort of becomes deadpan and says, take aim at the rich boys and take them down. They can buy anything, but they can't buy backbone. Don't let them forget that. So like we can tell he's over life. He has a chip on his shoulder in some way and has sort of a radical way about him, right? No filter. Yeah.
Cut to Max, who's writing down notes
in perfect calligraphy.
Yeah, in perfect calligraphy, as is, every character in a Wes Anderson film. But he's like enamored while everyone else is kind of sleepy. It's interesting because I actually went to one of these types of schools. I went to a Rushmore for high school.
All right, so that's clearly pedagogy. We'll get into that.
Yeah, I just wanted to say this scans.
All right. So yeah, he writes, this guy, best chapel speaker I have ever seen in like perfect calligraphy. And I have to point out, this is the only film where it's justified that he writes in perfect calligraphy though.
Yes.
So anyway, Max gives a standing O while no one else cares. Murray and Brian Cox, who plays Dr. Guggenheim, are then leaving the chapel.
Who's like the dean of Rushmore. Dean of the school of Rushmore. Yeah.
And Bloom says, I paid for the whole natatorium. The least little shits can do is hear me out, like justifying his speech. And then Max approaches to say how much he enjoyed the speech and how much it meant to him. And he like mirrors him and does sort of social engineering.
Like he's clearly
stuff.
Enamored.
Yeah. And comports himself well enough that when he leaves, Bill Murray goes like, that's a sharp little guy. And he clearly made a good impression. And there's a pause. And then Dr. Guggenheim says, he's one of the worst students we've got. Like in a sort of
pretty solid. And it's
way.
Signaling pretty early on that Max is the type of person that once he gets obsessed, he's all into that thing.
Huge montage.
And that's kind of how he does.
Of frankly too many things. But 41 or something different clubs that either founded or is the captain of or the president of, ending with like 4.5 flight hours logged in pilot training.
The only
or whatever.
thing I want to notice, like I want to point out, because most of it's like
montage.
lacrosse team manager, debate stamps, stuff that you'd be like, yeah.
Fencing
nerdy
club
stuff,
president.
but like I get it. But sometimes they really made the, like, for example, it's just dodgeball. But Wes Anderson decides that this type of school would call it bombardment. I just think that that's like the most Wes
Bombardment
Anderson
Society.
thing. Yeah,
He's the founder of Bombardment Society.
Which is just like, I don't know. It's just, I can't enjoy it.
Russia at the Model UN, Trap and Ski Club founder, Beekeepers president.
Noticeable.
Yeah.
Go-kart racing, which
Soapbox
has
Derby racer founder. Yeah.
Owen Wilson and Wes Anderson driving go-karts in
And
the
of
back
course,
of that shot.
the most important one, Max Fisher Player's director. So the next thing we're going to be introduced to is that he writes and directs plays. And that's something he actually does seem to follow through on and is obsessed with. So then we get the next curtain, which is September, and it's on. Did you notice the curtains go RGB? I don't know.
Oh,
if
yeah,
it
that
means
makes
anything.
sense. I mean, that's like that's the palette of the film.
Of film, right?
No,
generally,
I mean this film in general,
aren't
in specific.
Don't projectors do RGB?
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure. Like all media is not print, but like RGB
CMYK
is like it's how your eyes work. Anyway,
so it could mean something, could just be good.
Well, it's
design
just that
sense.
it's I think it's his design sense because it's the palette of this film. Like if you look at the strong blues, you look at the strong reds, you look at the strong. They're always pronounced.
Yeah, so the scene is Dr. Guggenheim. It's basically Animal House, dude, telling him that he's on sudden death academic probation, and he'll fail out of Rushmore if he flunks another class.
He's kind of not good at class.
He goes,
or not kind of. He really isn't good at it.
Too many extracurriculars, Max, not enough studying. Dr. Guggenheim, and I don't want to tell you how to do your job, but the fact is, no matter how hard I try, I still might flunk another class. If I have to stay on for a postgraduate year, then so be it. We don't offer a postgraduate year. Well, we don't offer it yet. Just a great encapsulation of both the characters, letting them play off each other in the most perfect way possible, because
very fun banter, because the
really refreshes the crusty
so
old Dean thing. It's if the crusty old Dean was right, like totally right.
It's because Brian Cox is immutable. He's just the stone character that is just like, he says something and you're like, well, that's just the truth.
Yeah.
That's what his presence kind of affords. Max is a guy who's an overreacher, so he thinks he braces the news with like a misplaced understanding that it's a negotiation. It's a tactic he uses all the time.
Right.
And he mentions like, I got into Rushmore because I wrote a Watergate play in the second grade. Can't we do it for old time's sake? Which is a reference directly to Godfather.
It's impressive on its face, but if you dig deeper, I'm sure it was some kind of sham or not good or half-assed.
Sure. Yeah, it's all, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and you get that impression that there's a long history of this because he tells Dirk, who's like his little sidekick, that they're trying to kick him out. And Dirk's response is, oh, no, not again. So this happens all the time. But we get the impression it's new that he's going to get expelled. Like that's a new element.
He has to float by and they say no. And that's news to him. So
he says, what are you going to do? He says, I'll pull some strings with the administration, which you already know. Well, that's meaningless. He can't do that.
Cut.
Yeah.
To library, where he notices someone wrote in the Jacques Cousteau book that he's reading and he holds like for most of the film. And it's just another quote from a Jacques Cousteau. Like, so it's not even like, vandalism.
But it resonates with him.
He does point it out to the librarian who points out,
dude, but you can't skip that beat is so great in terms of, I know you're trying to speed us along, but this is what it is. The transition between, because all the film grammar leads you to believe that he's being inspired by the quote, which in fact he is, because he's going to become obsessed with the person who wrote it.
Right. Yeah, that is funny.
It's like, when one man, for whatever reason, has the opportunity to lead an extraordinary life, he has no right to keep it to himself. And you're like, oh, that's him. It's impacting him. hard cut to him reporting the vandalism to the security guard.
It tells you what kind of guy Max is, which is, it's Act 1 is like really good.
Yeah.
Like it's solid, like really no notes other, from in general. It's
so,
on the Criterion Collection. Everyone loves this film.
He quickly tracks down the person who wrote the quote, who's Miss Cross, the new teacher at the school. And he looks through basically the window in her door at her teaching, and film grammar tells us that he falls in love with her. You know what I mean? Like, it's just apparent that he's into her now. And then you cut to him directing a play about hard-boiled cops, which is it an adaptation of anything? Because I know he does Serpico later, and Carlito's Way at one point, I think.
Yeah, they no, they're all fictionalized, but it's just the idea that they're all tropes of stuff. Like there's a quote in this movie of heat. Like he's just taking pop culture. Well,
Serpico is definitely literally an adaptation of Serpico.
He also just does stuff where he's just like, I want something like that. Like I'm writing an original play, but I want it to but let's make sure she has cocaine or something like that. It's always adult themed, and sometimes he, seems to do covers, so to speak.
Yeah. After rehearsal, why don't you take it?
Well, I believe, isn't this where he? I thought it was the next day. Does he have a rehearsal bit? I didn't write it down. I have next.
There's jokes in rehearsal, but the next thing is Dirk's mom picking him up in the Jaguar.
So Max hits on Dirk's mom, which if you see the Rosemary Cross stuff, Max is kind of the type of person who does this kind of thing. He sees an attractive woman and is like, I think I got a shot. So she, kindly thanks him for taking an interest in his friendship with Dirk, because Dirk's this kind of like tiny little boy who, could be bullied, I guess. And Miss Calloway is just thanking Max, who's slightly bigger. Thanks for like keeping him from the bullies. In the sequence, they kind of do introduce the bully. What's his name?
Buchan.
His name is...
Yeah. I also think there's an implied system, like a big brother, little brother system at the school.
Yeah.
Because he picked him as chapel partner or something.
He's also wearing his safety patrol sash during this. So it's another extracurricular we have.
So he's officially his sidekick. And he gives her his card, which says Rushmore Extension 23. So he just completely exists as a... part of Rushmore.
He's like, I'm a real deal, but he's not a real deal. That's what Max's deal is.
Yeah, so Buchan says he would have banged her by now if he was flirting with this mom, which Max essentially is. And Max says, tell that ugly Scottish gorilla to shut his fat face. We reveal Buchan shooting spitwads at kids and laughing. So it's interesting to me how much it is just a refreshment of almost the Futurama Robot House episode, because the tropes are crusty old Dean and like very traditional bully.
Yeah, I mean, kind of traditional. He always got to put his Wes Anderson spin on it, and this one, I guess, it's that he's got a Scottish accent,
which is an interesting way to put a spin on something. But Max, this happens next. Yeah, Max spots
sees
Mr.
Herman.
Bloom. Yeah, picking up his kids and runs over to say hi. Bill asks, what's the secret, Max? He says, I think you just got to find something you love to do and do it for the rest of your life. For me, it's going to Rushmore. Then we meet his kids, Ronnie and Donnie, who fight for shotgun. They suck.
They're not polite like Max, which is a unique, thing that you start to notice, because like Herman lights up when Max speaks, like even though Max seems to linger and want to be in his presence in a clingy way, Herman is lonely and needs that kind of thing, is the vibe we're starting to get. Next scene, Max gets a haircut from a classic.
Sorry. Before we move on, asks if he invited, because he's starting to take a shine to him. But I think people would think we're remiss if we didn't mention Bill Murray reaching back and hitting his kid after he tells him, "Take your head out of your ass, Dad."
Yeah.
All right. Go ahead.
Yeah. Max gets a haircut from. I just wanted to point out that he reveals the scene. Not in the way where it's his dad. We realize later it's his dad, but it's like he's getting a haircut from a classic barber, which is once again like it's one of those things that I just say it's unnecessary twee. That's where my flag goes up and I go, why did you do that? Why did you reveal it like that? And it's because the only thing that really motivated Wes Anderson I can think of is to induce a little bit more style, a little bit more mystique, and add some like you believe for a second that Max is the kind of guy who would go to like a barber, like do a very an adult thing, I guess. But then you realize, because he's like reading the newspaper while it happens, you realize that he's just a child. That part I do think is intentional and I think is good. I just think it's I just wanted to notice that he did
I
that.
think there's the meaning I got from it is that it's form follows function, in the sense that we will find out as a recurring thing that he tells people that his father's a neurosurgeon. And one of the signs of growth that's very concrete for the end of the screenplay is for him to start introducing his dad as, my dad's a barber and I don't give a shit, I'm proud. And therefore,
Sure.
we, the audience, are experiencing that as well. We're introduced to him not knowing that's his dad, and then find out it is, and it sort of mirrors what's going to happen later. Is
That's,
one
of
thought I had.
course- No, that's absolutely true. He signs his son's bad grades, and shows that he also doesn't care too much for schools. He'd be fine if like Max went anywhere. He didn't really go anywhere, but he clearly is engaged in Rushmore. He wants him to succeed, but he's not the type of dad who's like, you have bad grades, you need to be better. He just, you almost got an 87. Because he takes a 37 and just completes the 3
just supportive and nice, basic dude.
Yeah, he's
and
basically just
I think notable. Most people will probably pick out at this point that they live adjacent to a cemetery, which is just like in film, grammar. You're like, that's interesting. That'll come back.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. I just am like, I like graveyards. I don't know. It's just a very Wes Anderson thing. Yes. But here we go. Max introduces himself to Rosemary by offering a light. She smokes.
It's an American Spirit, by the way.
Does a very cool thing. Of course it is. I mean...
Okay, that's why I mention it. It's the most Wes Anderson possible brand of cigarette.
Well, what is it? There's another one. God, it's been so long. What's this? What's the smokes that? Is it Neiman Marcus? No. Yes.
That's a fancy store.
That's a fancy
Nat
store. I don't know.
Sherman's?
There's one. Nat Sherman's. That's what I was thinking.
Is it? All right.
Yeah, because they're like colorful and stuff. That's the most Wes Anderson cigarette to me.
I think smoking literally a pastel stick is probably the most Wes Anderson.
Yeah, that's in that direction. Yeah, but otherwise, American Spirits.
Yeah.
For at least in the era that I was like, like in our college era, that was always the like elitist cigarette. I don't know if that's still true, but that's just like. To me, in this era, that was true.
So he says, where did you go to school? She says, Harvard. He says, what a coincidence. My top schools are Oxford and the Sorbonne. My safety's Harvard.
My safety's Harvard, even though we know what the fuck.
We know.
He says he's going to double major in math and pre-med, which we know isn't true.
Great
and they discuss
use of the over-exaggerated sound of the bleachers clanging every time he makes a status shift move toward or away from his goal. Because he wants to be next to her. And we developed this film grammar of like, he's going to come closer and it goes clang, 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 clang. Or he's going to retreat and it goes clang, clang, clang. It's great.
That is the shit. That is the shit that Wes Anderson is really good at. Like the idea of taking form and turning it into a sound cue. That's a great filmmaker,
That's why you're going to love the Fantastic Mr. Fox, dude. It's choices like that. She says her thesis was in Latin American economies. He mentions that they're canceling Latin and they have some sort of like semi-romantic repartee, but you get the impression that she's just being normal and polite to a student.
Yeah, which she does most of the film with the exception of some stuff. But and just as we jumped ahead from like a previous conversation, Latin is something that Max wants to get rid of. He's like, it's a dead language. So in his opinion, we already know in this movie, he's actually a proponent of, he's one of the people that she would be like, oh, that's a shame. But he immediately reverses.
Right. Actually, she says a Latin phrase, nihilo sanctum est or something. And he goes, what's that? oh, it's Latin, isn't it?
Oh, it's Latin.
You can hear the hate in his voice.
But then he comes back with more Latin.
Yeah, sic transit gloria.
Which I don't understand. It becomes like I don't understand what that move is, because Max wouldn't be a guy who understands Latin, so he wouldn't be smooth to pull off that apt quote.
Here's what I was hoping.
Back at her?
And it doesn't come true. No, it does. I think that's in reference to the shot at the end where we finally see his mother's gravestone. We realize that's why they live by the cemetery. And her gravestone says, all glory eventually fades, is part of her epitaph.
So he got it from the
So I assume
gravestone.
he learned that in Latin because it's on his mother's gravestone. So he's obsessed with the phrase.
Now my question is, why is that on a gravestone? But anyway, this is neither here nor there. It's movies.
It's a pretty good movie. Anyway, he quickly circulates a petition and gets Latin to be required now for all grades.
Yes. And in fact, people hate him for it. The bully
fucking bullies him again. Why don't you just piss off, you dirty wee skid mark?
But he doesn't care.
Is that Latin?
Is that like, he doesn't care. This is his new obsession. This is his new Rushmore. This woman, and she, of course,
and now
she's
it becomes
because she's Olivia Williams, who's
dueling
amazing.
Pepe Le Pews, just sexually harassing a reasonable woman, which is a big flaw of the film. I think. I mean, as you watch it now.
Yeah. I'd say actually, it's not that their advances are so crazy. Like, it's not Pepe Le Pew in that respect.
And only when Max...
They are clingy and like, I'm going to be here now, and they lie. There's a lot of bad stuff. I'm going to blame them for that. But I also think that the writing of it makes her like, oh, it's fine. And that's like, I don't know if that's true. You know what I mean? It's like, it's less that...
Yeah, that's my issues. I just honestly think it gets to that point for me when Max literally like puts his hand around her head and tries to force her into a kiss with him.
And she's like, I'll give him a pass.
And he's a 15-year-old student and she's a teacher. It's like, it just is very intense. Yeah. And that could be by design. You know, that may be the point of that scene.
It's not the greatest, and it's also very indicative of 98. I'm not going to throw Wes Anderson on the bus for being particularly
I love
too much
this movie.
in this direction. Yeah, I'm just saying, like, it's just, it's one of those things that 98 bumps you, and on top of that, he's using it as an effective in like, oh, this is endearing, and that's a little more than casual.
Not endearing, but he quickly after that learns his lesson and grows, and we're like, okay, he's all good. And I'm like, is he? That was pretty far. He went pretty far.
Yeah, that's we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
So he spends more time. Oh, no, we should go back to their I advanced
to the wrestling scene.
Yeah, so next is they're at a wrestling meet, which seems like Max is not on the team at first. He and Bloom discuss again, and their, banter, of course, is like two professional colleagues. And that we find out that Max wasn't invited to the twins' birthday party, so Bloom offers him to come. He declines. He says he's got a previous engagement. But Bloom, kind of seeing how graceful Max is at this moment, decides to offer him a job, saying, I need people like you. And and that is interrupted by Max.
Well, Max says, look, Mr. Bloom, my dad may just be a neurosurgeon, but we manage.
And then we reveal that they call his number. Max is actually on the wrestling team.
Yeah, he gets out of the
suit, and under his suit is his, wrestling uniform, and he is absolutely creamed, which is a nice little bit. Is that he's master? He's just a jack of all trades. Yeah. We cut to an unhappy Bloom watching his shitty twins enjoy their birthday. His wife is clearly sleeping around. He throws golf balls into the pool. It's
like a political cartoon of your wife is cuckolding you.
No, it's literally, it's very ordinary people if you've seen that film. He smokes, drinks scotch, does a cannonball, and stays at the bottom. That's
filmed
another like mainstay.
Very Wes Anderson shot.
Very big mainstay of Wes Anderson. He's like, he wants that deprivation tank. He wants that Jacques Cousteau shit. He wants separation because he's so... that's why he likes Jacques Cousteau.
Interesting to connect it to Jacques Cousteau. I hadn't thought of it in that light.
Oh, absolutely.
He loves that.
Just like Jacques Cousteau is in multiple films. When we get to Zissou, it's going to be talking about self-isolation. Everything about the Wes Anderson verse to me is always about how do you deal with dysfunction and how are the improper ways to do so. And this is something that he actually, I think, it's weird because it's this weird in between of idolization and like criticism, but we'll talk more about that later.
Well, yeah, and Bloom's clearly a precursor to Tannenbaum, but we'll
we're
talk
like,
more
this
about
is
that
cool.
later.
In this moment, we're like, this is cool. We kind of feel for Bloom.
Yeah.
He's so sad. He's so like unique and complex. And look at this.
And it's Murray's performance. He's the ultimate charming,
Of course.
you can't
Yeah.
not like him guy. So,
Speaking of water, Max spends more time with Rosemary feeding fish. Or did you want to say
no,
one
no,
thing?
that's the perfect segue. You did it.
Yeah. And
Go, Eel Boy.
We noticed he actually brought back she notices he brought back Latin from the dead, and he asked to be her assistant, and she's like, well, good job on the Latin stuff, that's cool, but she doesn't she doesn't say good job, she's just happy about that because she doesn't know about the Latin yet. And we learned that she's been widowed for a year, and she lost her husband,
And that his mother died when he was 7.
so they kind of have a moment of, unity of grief. Yeah. And he's falling harder in love with her. He's spending more time helping. And he's just taking note that she has fish.
Bloom's office, steel factory.
Yes.
He's on the horn with the boys on the East Coast, and he's putting stuff in pneumatic tubes and saying, I don't want alloys. I want steel. God damn it. Steel.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. This is the job. Well, I'm doing a job. You don't believe I'm doing
exactly.
a job? Fuck you. So Max applies for the job, and he says he needs to raise money for an aquarium for the school, even though we know it's basically just he wants to impress
Rosemary. Yeah. He asked for $35,000.
He'll cost $35,000. Bloom hands him a check that's $2.5K. He's like, it's worth that.
I'll give you $2,500.
So we cut to a montage. He does that. He gets more fish for the aquarium. He's doing like prep for Rosemary things, but he's starting all right, whatever you need to do to build like aquarium. And that's kind of like there's so many montages in this film, by the way. And it's just kind of a short one.
Reminds me of Hudsucker, which I love.
Mm-hmm. It culminates in the school library where Rosemary's grading papers, and then Max is suddenly there, and he dotes on her again and asks if he's thought about. She asks because she notices the doting, because now we've gotten to the 3 beats where it's like, I can't stop being around you. I'm trying to get too close to you. And then she's like, okay, maybe I'm
the adult. I have to say something. Yeah.
Maybe you're too young for me. He's very despondent.
Has it ever crossed your mind that you're too young for me? He says, I've considered that you might think that's a possibility. Yes.
Yeah. And he also posits that no one knows where this relationship is going, which she's like, what do you mean by relationship? Nothing can happen. But she does tell him that she's never met anyone like him. After all, he tells her the same. So it's this kind of thing where Wes Anderson and Owen Wilson, the writers of this, are doing this thing where they're saying like, no, she's doing all the right stuff. She's, putting up the boundaries, making it very clear to Max. But we all know, I guess, and she should start beginning to know that Max is not ordinary, like he'll go for it. So she should take extra care in dealing with that. I think it's kind of one of the things that the writer's kind of allowing, that in this moment she'd be like, I have never met anyone like you, Max.
Right.
That's what she thinks is letting him down easy. But it is like Max.
You question her understanding of nuance or what she's doing. Yeah. And of course, there's no way that Schwartzman is actually 15 when he filmed this. So it also plays with your head a bit because he doesn't seem 15.
He doesn't seem 15 in a lot of ways. But at the end of the sequence, they do part kind of amicably, like at least
he seems to understand, but he's faking.
He seems, yeah.
So then we cut to his Serpico play.
Yeah.
And they're staging an adaptation of Serpico, or maybe he's trying to pass it off as, because interesting, Noah Baumbach will eventually be associated with West and then do Squid and the Whale, where the kid copies Comfortably Numb and pretends it's his own. So this idea of like adapting things to feel that you're very creatively fulfilled,
Oh, for sure.
as we
I'm gonna
analyze
talk about-
film
Yeah.
to feel creatively fulfilled. But anyway, that aside, backstage, he basically hassles one of the actors for dropping a line, and he goes like, the cannoli line's important, every line is important, and the guy still has that Serpico energy, so he's like, get off my back, and ends up punching Max. And giving him like a black eye and a bloody nose. And
they're like tortured artists, He's really he's inspiring that kind of culture, which is kind of hilarious.
When he comes out to get his, ovation at the end of the play as writer-director, Serpico doesn't clap, which I think is a very nice touch.
Right. Also, it's in slow-mo, which is a director kind of trademark.
Oh, yeah. And, well, it will end with standard speed shot going to slow-mo to represent a character being sad underneath. So it's the same ending as Bottle Rocket in some ways. But video games are iterative. I still love them. Anyway.
No, he's just got it's a trademark. It's not like it's a feature. It's not a bug.
So the whole point of this was also to gather, like, Miss Cross is there and Dad is there, and because so now they're schmoozing after the play, but also Miss Cross brought Luke Wilson, aka Peter Flynn, who's dressed in doctors or like surgical scrubs. So he really is what he claims his dad is. There's something there. And he assumes, like we, the audience, assume that they're a couple. And he is immediately comically hostile to Peter Flynn.
Yeah. Max is very petty. And we, not only that, we cut to a dinner between the four of them. Bloom, Luke Wilson,
as well,
Max, and Olivia Williams, and it's more of the same. He brags about his play. He's now drinking alcohol, which we learn that Bloom let him because it was his big night. He basically just tries to push Luke Wilson out, and he throws a tantrum. He confesses his love for Rosemary as well. It's very awkward.
Yeah, I like your nurse's uniform, guy. These are OR scrubs. Oh, are they? And then what I love is Bloom laughs at. Yeah. It cracks up
because we get the feeling that Bloom is also a little bit hammered. So
yeah, Bloom's into it. And he says, "Well, they're totally inappropriate for the occasion." Well, I didn't know we were going to dinner.
He's not wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, OR Scrubs is not truly appropriate for a theater
play.
setting.
Sure, I think you get special dispensation when you cut people open to save them.
There's a lot of goodwill because there's so much. We don't need to be ragging on people who work at hospitals. Yeah. One
more exchange before we move on from the great dinner scene, because he keeps pretending not to know his name. That's his main dig.
Sure.
So he says, "So tell me, Curly." How do you know Miss Cross? And he goes, "We went to Harvard together." Hey, that's great. I wrote a hit play and directed it, so I'm not sweating it either.
God damn.
Just great stuff.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
The wheels fall off. Yeah. It's a terrible night. Miss Cross flips out.
We cut to school again. Bloom seeks out Rosemary. He's got a message from Max, he says, about an apology. A possible apology, maybe. He's not sure, which, we learn later that Bloom is sure of what he's here for. Rosemary thinks that they shouldn't see each other, meaning Max, anymore because he's too attached. And Bloom is like, whatever you want to do. And he asks for her first name. He then reveals that he actually has just straight up a letter from Max, because of course that's how Max does correspondences. And then we hear that letter read.
He's inviting her to the groundbreaking for the new aquarium, which we see is happening on the baseball diamond, which is obviously, you can tell it's not on the up and up immediately, because they tease you with like, there's guys with chainsaws, and he's like, cut down all these trees to make room for the aquarium. You're like, there's no way he got permission for that. And he's trying to delay so that Cross will show up.
Right.
The baseball coach is like, are you supposed to be doing this? And wanders off. So you're like, this is about to get shut down. Dirk tells Max Miss Cross is out sick, called in sick today. And he calls Bloom, who also conspicuously can't be gotten a hold of and usually can. So you're kind of piecing it together. And then, as expected, the baseball coach and Guggenheim and a security guard or cop or something all run up with him going,
like, none of this
what are you
is
doing?
sanctioned.
Yeah.
And Max,
Robot House!
In a very good cut, we reveal Guggenheim, they're
Silently
now
chewing
behind,
Max
silently,
out.
and chewing him out. Max is crying. Jump cut to new school, and actually not jump cut. It's one of the curtains.
It's a green curtain.
October. Max is in public school, and it's, as you'd expect, a normal public school. Just a teacher saying, "There's someone who wants to give a speech." He gives a speech to his new class, still in his Rushmore jacket, about not being an elitist and about how he's excited about being at the new school, and he'll stand up for the little guy, and he'll get better extracurriculars. Cue Margaret Yang in the hallways, who's basically speaks in the same way as Max, showing that she values the same things and commends his speech. He kind of waves her off as if she doesn't exist.
Fish out of water sequence, essentially. It's Act 2, baby. So, he got his world twisted, but he's going to try and apply the same thing. So we see him fencing alone while people play basketball around him in the basketball court, and other quick postcards of he's trying to apply his Rushmore tactics, but it's not working. He eventually calls Bloom from a school phone, gets hassled by a security guard as Bloom says, Miss Cross isn't really right for you. And at the same time, we see Bloom stalking her, essentially. And as a side note, just shutting down a kid on the basketball court.
God, it's the best part of the movie. Just Bill Murray packing the shit out of some kids playing basketball. Absolutely posterizes these kids. It's you've seen it. It's great.
Max sneaks out of what is revealed to be Grover Cleveland High to find Rosemary Cross. And I
love that even Rushmore, which is like the name of a bunch of presidents, Grover Cleveland. It's like a shitty president. I don't know.
That totally works.
He's just a lesser known. I don't. I don't actually know.
You
much
don't
about
know what
Grover
his deal vis-a-vis the country. He goes to Rushmore. He sees Buckin with his cast and a cigarette and a big knife. It's like all the bully props in a tree. And he stops him and he sort of gives him like a psychological dressing down, says, you're not allowed to be here. You're a big show with no results. And to shut him up, he claims that you think I just got kicked out because the aquarium. No. It was It was the hand job, and basically says
I'm a cool kid who gets hand jobs from mom.
Did give him a hand job,
yeah, because he really does care what people think of him, and he's a teenager. Can we fault?
Right?
Can we truly fault him for a lot of stuff? Yes, a lot of the other stuff. Well, I mean, teenagers are fucking. Just a nightmare because of what's going on in their brain and their bodies. So he's probably reacting like a child would.
But he finds Cross and he reveals the book to her, which has the desired. He's basically becoming a master manipulator, like gaslighter. At this point.
Really is. Yeah.
So it has the effect he wanted, which is to stir feeling in her, and reveals their Jacques Cousteau connection. And she talks about how the book was given to her by her dead husband, Edward Appleby, I think is the name.
I believe so.
Yeah, and she says, you remind me of him. And he says, I do, how? Well, you remember the Rushmore Beekeepers. He founded that club. So we get the impression that they are somehow, like maybe he was a go-getter like Max in some way. Max asks if they can be friends again and that's all he's really interested in. And you're like, bullshit, but whatever. Because he says he was trying really hard at Cleveland, but he thinks he might need a tutor. So now
another way just to be
around her.
He doesn't care. I mean, we actually see that he's starting to excel, because I guess that may be because of the tutoring, but we see a montage where Max is like spending all of his time with Bloom, and
Cross, and they're both trying to
Margaret
win her
Yang,
affection.
kind of like some Rushmore crew, watches him excel. He's kind of succeeding already. And he's getting slightly improved grades. He got a C-. So I think that he's just doing this to Rosemary just because it's just like, I want to be.
He can do 12 backflips in a row. He's doing good.
He's doing good.
Soon enough, he's working on another play, which I thought was a Carlito's Way adaptation, but I could be wrong. Spots Margaret Yang and asks her to be in it. Sort of like coerces her or just assumes, you're in the play now. I've discovered you. Auditorium at 3:30. Bring a headshot, please. Bloom comes to see Cross at home and they have some banter over carrots. And again, you get the impression that she's kind of just being polite because he's exceedingly awkward but somehow this does off camera at some point blossom into, something resembling a relationship. But
the beginnings of it, and then it just doesn't really work out.
They go on a walk
like,
together, and
there's an energy. They hold hands while they walk.
But Dirk spots them, and you get sinister organ music.
A sinister organ music over a little child on a bike. One of the best. Just because out of the mouth of babes, like it can all fall apart, and it does.
He confronts him immediately.
Bloom about their side hangs, and so Bloom obviously fears Max's knowledge of this, and Dirk tells Bloom that he's a married man. And Dirk says, "You're not a true friend to Max," and he spits on his car.
Yeah.
The bully tells Dirk that Max only hangs out with him because he's into his mom, tells him about the fact that he said that he got a hand job from her. Dirk says, "Nah, Max would never say that." The bully responds, "Yeah, right," like he doesn't lie, which is basically Dirk kind of knows that's secretly
midpoint.
True.
So it's actually in this movie,
all
the full
of the
world
seeds
flip
have been
was
set
losing
for the
Dirk's
downfall.
loyalty. That's the bottom of the barrel.
Well, yeah, and like up to the midpoint in a movie like this, everything has been planted so that the seeds of destruction will ensue in this next two sequences, next 30 minutes, which begins now. Dirk sends him a letter to Max. A crayon letter to Max about the affair. He says that he's telling him because he's just such a good friend. Max surprises Bloom like in his car. Max is now like straight up doing like next level like crime shit. And it's because he's jealous. Bloom says he's in love with Rosemary and he wants to see where it goes. Max says he was in love with her first. And then Max guarantees that Rosemary will never be in love with him. And because he saved Latin. What did Bloom ever do?
Max crashes Mrs. Cross's class to say, "I'm sorry, I just came by to thank you for wrecking my life." And this is the point in my notes where I just wrote like, okay, at this point, through 2022 eyes, I'm just like, leave this poor woman alone, everyone, please. At this point, it's just like where it starts to feel like
this
that.
Poor widow, fresh, like a year still, like
just re-triggering her trauma over and over.
Let her set the terms for like what her romantic life is going to be for a bit.
But in an amazing, these two beats though, the tone of them would be right at home in a peak Arrested Development, in my opinion. Because the next shot is Max burning leaves in the Rushmore yard, and Guggenheim smells it out his window, and he's like, "Max, God damn it, what are you doing?"
God damn it, Max.
Max just lights a cigarette and slowly flips him off, and it's just such a great image.
I can't stop thinking of Succession during this movie, where just Guggenheim, fuck off. It's just anyway. So Max calls Bloom's wife and tells her of the affair.
Escalating feud.
Which I love that little the way we introduce it, because if anything, Max is polite, so he brought sandwiches. So he offers her, you can take it tuna fish or the other one. She takes the tuna fish. He's got multiple options, and over some car ambiance, which I thought would pay off, but doesn't.
I thought that was the weirdest choice in the film for me. Was why not?
Because the sound is drowned.
Why not
out.
just script the way Max would? We've heard everything he's said. Why not just have him say it?
So we assume. And it is true that Max tells her that Bloom is cheating. We cut to him because that's the other thing. Immediately. It's not like it's done just to kind of like marionette the audience to be like, dramatic irony for a little bit, like make them feel catharsis for like a false beat later, which is something that stories do in this section. So maybe that is enough. He's like, film grammar wise, maybe they're going to be thinking that I'm going to be doing something with this, but I just don't.
Or I thought it might have been meant to resonate with that great shot of Guggenheim chewing him out, like devastating someone under silence as a motif. But then I would have tears running down the face of.
Yeah, I would do
the
it
wife
more.
Or something.
I would nail it home. This is so far removed. The shots look so different. There's no other attempt to make them a quote of each other. So I don't believe it, but yeah. In any case, immediately we are given an answer because we see Bloom checking into a hotel. So that immediately seems verified. In his room, as he gets there and he's settling in.
Now,
Max has released bees.
and this feels truly genius to me because
It's very
it
good.
shows Wes Anderson's knowledge and use of what he himself, like he's aware of what he is and he can use it. And I think this is the perfect example of that because it's a shot that is perfectly posed like out of a catalog, like a Wes Anderson movie, if you will, of like hands and a newspaper and a watch and a nice teacup and a gift basket with honey and like a honey dipper, and all placed meticulously in a way that he's saying, this is like the kind of shot I do. Get it? And to make it all perfect, there's a little bee in the corner because, it goes with the motif, bees, honey, and you don't think about it till you sit on it long enough, and then there's a second bee and you're like, wait, why are there bees though? And then you slowly reveal that Max has piped bees into the room to harass Bloom. And I just think that's like an actual escalation of him being self-aware in a way that I really enjoy.
I like that there's a nice touch where Bill Murray Bloom smiles and then his smile fades, like he's like, you got me,
but this means war. Yeah.
And then we see another slow-mo tracking shot of him taking the box of bees down the elevator while wearing a staff uniform. Yeah. Pretty cool.
Then Bloom goes with bolt cutters, steals Max's bike, crushes it with his car, and puts it back and ties the lock in a knot.
Max is brought
the
to
groundskeeper,
jail.
Mr. Little Jean, sees him, who we haven't mentioned and I think just deserves a shout out at some point. So then we see Max on a new bike, who rides to Bloom's factory and cuts the brakes on his car. And now it is officially just a Looney Tunes cartoon, this whole stretch of the movie. But that causes him to almost crash into and crush to death Mr. Little Jeans, but he doesn't, thank God. But it does have my favorite joke, which is him filing a police report on Max and describing him as go-getter, black hair, glasses, oval face.
I also like that he knows exactly how heavy, like he's 112 pounds.
Right.
Because I think it's
the wrestling scene.
The wrestling scene.
He had to weigh in. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then we cut to him in jail. It worked. He's in jail, which is interesting that a 15-year-old, I guess they would hold you for that, but
they would hold you, but they wouldn't put you in. It makes it seem like he's going to
like adult jail.
Federal pound me in the ass.
But anyway, we're spared that because Max's dad bails him out, and his new plan is to get Miss Cross fired, right?
That's not what his plan is, but that's how it can be easily interpreted because, like, he's on a different level. If he's clearly trying to hatch a new plan.
He's like, I'm going to come back at this guy yet again.
And we never see those moves.
Okay.
So he's just like, that's not what I'm doing. And then it's like interrupted. So like, I believe that this is some bigger, larger plan. But the initial one is he's just getting photos of them out. I think it's probably more fuel for the fire of like, I'm going to get you divorced, even though that's already on its way and will happen regardless of what Max does.
But for some reason, that's not fully clear. I think it will become so later. He's at Rushmore and gets stopped by Dirk. And in a very Anderson-y touch, it's Halloween Day. Why not? So all the little kids are in various Halloween costumes, and Dirk is dressed as a wizard. And he leads the kids, the littler kid class, in throwing rocks and pine cones at. And we get the feeling it's payback for the hand job thing. I mean, he says something to that effect. And then
he knows it's
Max calls a truce. And Dirk says, Buckin told me this. And at this point, Max just holds the lie. Like, you know what I mean? He says, well, that's a goddamn lie. And I'm going to send that Mick back to Ireland in a body bag. And I'm going to pop a cap in his ass.
Pop a cap in his ass.
Pretty dated language, but I think that's kind of the point. He goes to see Guggenheim, who has sent him a package he has sent him a package.
This is the snapshots, yeah.
That's the snapshots of Bloom with Cross. And I think that's supposed to, I don't know, shame both of them. But
yeah, that's what I was saying, yeah.
Guggenheim didn't really look through it and says, I never took you for an informer, Max. He says, what's that supposed to mean? And he says, what's that supposed to mean? Which is deeply cathartic. It's like on Spielboys, you guys talk about that scene in Empire of the Sun where the maid finally slaps him.
Yeah, it's very good. Yeah.
Very satisfying.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, Max needed that. Yeah.
What the fuck you mean?
But he does. But Guggenheim does tell him that like Rosemary resigned her position before he even got Max's package. So you are not only are you a piece of shit for doing all this nonsense, you're ultimately ineffective because the adults are doing their own mechanizations anyway. And one of the Rosemary's like Cross is essentially just, I'm going to bail. This is not for me. So we cut to that. Rosemary is moving her stuff out of her classroom, and Max, of course, on his way out, visits.
She says, "I'm sorry, I love your friend instead of you," which is very overly generous of her to say.
Right.
But it does establish like, oh, I guess she and Bloom were fooling around or like going down that road of a romantic relationship.
Oh,
which
yeah,
is
she
just,
says
it
she
happens on the
loves-
margins,
yeah.
but she says she
Yeah.
loves him. And then he tries to force a kiss on her, and I just
Right,
thought
and
that
she
was too
just-
far.
Yeah, and she obviously manhandles him because he's 15. And he yells, I like this sequence of lines where it's, Rushmore was my life, now you are. And then she asks how this would all go. Do you think we were going to have sex? That's kind of a cheap way of putting it. Not if you've ever fucked before, it isn't. So it's just like, your dream of what's being happened, Max, is now being completely deflated by the realities of adulthood, the realities of other people's wants. In other words, we're no longer in your imagination land where you can kind of taste test everything like you've been doing.
So
You
now
have
we
to
got to
stand by
drive him
what you
into
are.
his all his lost moments. So on his way out,
Yeah.
Max is accosted by the bully and his henchmen, who are both dressed in identical Jason Voorhees masks, which I really love. And Dirk and the
both wanted to
kids
be,
watch him
yeah.
get his ass kicked by Buckin.
It's-
And in an
yeah.
upside down POV shot, all the little kids look in. And he's like, well, we got him, Dirk. We got him.
We got him. Another lie to save face.
And reaches for his hand, and Dirk just walks away in
Walks away.
disgust.
Low point.
So, you've lost Dirk's loyalty. Yet again, Dirk is the barometer of how you're doing in life.
Yeah, because he's his best friend who asks for nothing.
Innocent,
and if
right.
you've failed him, you've really failed anyone.
So what do you do when you're at your low point? You visit your mother's grave.
Your mom's grave.
Right, which is
Yeah.
right next to your house. And I like the touch that there's fresh flowers there, presumably from Bert, which is very cute. And it says, beloved wife of Bert and mother of Max, the paths of glory lead but to the grave. So I do think there's some connection with the sick transit Gloria thing there, but I could be wrong. Bloom walks up. Max invited him and he said, why? And he said, you said you wanted to put an end to all this. And he goes, oh yeah, I was going to try and have that tree over there fall on you. And he goes, that big one? Yep. Would have flattened me like a pancake. What stopped you? What's the point? She loves you. So he wants to bury the hatchet. He's completely given up. It's like, life is over.
Still kind of hostile, but resigned, seemingly.
Bloom says she's my Rushmore, Max, and he goes, I know she was mine too. And then, of course,
He rips a
the
small
tree
branch from
falls.
the new tree.
Like, it clearly would have killed him.
It's funny because there's no way that would work. That's nonsense magic.
Right.
You don't rip a small branch from a tree and it falls. But, it's funny. And then we get a montage. Max goes to work for his dad, and it's like a sad montage. He doesn't seem interested anymore in extracurriculars or living an extraordinary life like Jacques Cousteau says people should. Margaret Yang visits him with a plant as
He
a present,
refuses
but
to
Max,
notice her for whatever reason. Yeah.
but Max won't see her. And as weird touch, I don't know what exactly it means. He later brings it to his mother's grave. I think it's just opportunist. I don't know what that means.
The potted plant. Yeah.
The potted plant. He's like, I
think it's just an easy way to
care.
get rid of it. I don't care about this. Yeah.
Yeah, I just didn't need to know that answer in this movie. Any
Mm-hmm.
other notes on this montage before we go to December?
No, it's doing the basic, but you don't notice the opportunity right in front of your face,
Yeah,
until you
exactly.
do.
Yeah.
December, red curtain. We've come full circle from red to red.
Max's dad tells him that he's always thought he'd be more than a barber, Max is so dejected And he's
He
just
says,
like,
"No, Dad, I'm a barber's son."
I'm a barber's son, which is okay. Settle down, Decemberists. And then he's then visited by Dirk, who apologizes for throwing the rocks, which I thought was kind of sweet. And he brings him a present. It's a Swiss Army knife with Max's name engraved.
Get it? Because Max is so versatile, but none of the tools on a Swiss Army knife are as good as their real counterparts. I think it's a perfect gift for Max. I love it.
Perfect gift for Max. Yeah. Yep, and also we get that like Boy Scout energy that you get from a Swiss Army
always
knife,
prepared,
always
obsessed
always
with a lot of different utilities.
A Wes Anderson film. Max cuts his hair, and they're friends again.
Hooray! He suggests that he visit Guggenheim in the hospital because he just had a stroke. So as a weird side note, just to sort of I think give them a final beat to their arc. Because it's got a real Wile E. Coyote Roadrunner vibe, and you got to wrap that up. He visits him
Robot House
and calls him old timer and says, "You probably can't hear me because they said your brain's damaged." But he goes, "What do you want? It's Max. It's Max Fisher." And they're like, "He hasn't talked in 10 days." So,
it's like he's so angry it got him his brain working.
He got his brain working, so he saved him by being so hateful to him.
Yeah.
So now that they're friends again, Dirk stakes out Bloom's house and sees him going into the that's kind of just a side note too. But main point is Bloom and Max cross paths at the hospital, and Bloom looks like shit now. And so
he's disheveled, drinking. He's got a black eye because one of his twins punched him, and he's just not taking the divorce well.
But it kind of becomes clear that doesn't have Cross in his life now either. And he lights a second cigarette while smoking a cigarette, which is just a great touch.
Always a good touch. Yeah.
Kids don't like it when their parents get divorced. I don't blame them. Neither do I. Great sequence.
Other lines that I liked, because he did know, because we do scan it. He says Rosemary left him 6 weeks ago, and he says the reason why is because she's still in love with the dead guy, which is Appleby.
Edward Appleby.
And I like the quote, "She's sweet, but she's fucked up."
Yeah, it's the Murray's delivery. Well, she's sweet, but she's fucked up.
And then I also like I forget what the question is that prompts it, but I also like Bill Murray's "I'm a little lonely these days."
Yeah, are you okay? Is the only question that prompts it.
Yeah, and that's how he exits the elevator.
But the big point is they buried the shovel by agreeing, we can't beat Edward Appleby. This has run its course. Everyone, we're done. But there's more movie. So Max uses a ladder because his obsession, of course, has to rear its ugly head one more time before he actually grows. Max uses a ladder to knock on Cross's window and claims to have just been hit by a car so that he can get in to use the phone. Crazy, creepy behavior, which is fine to depict in film. I encourage it if it's for the proper purposes.
But it's indicative of a lot.
But it's weird how he just skates by on that. He gets away with this kind of shit.
Yeah, he immediately puts on romantic music. We know almost immediately, okay, he's running a scam. Yeah. Like the blood is probably not real. And he asks immediately, "Why'd you dump Bloom?" She says, A, he's married. B, he hates himself. C, he smashed up your bicycle. And who does that? Which is all obvious things. And to which Max says, "War does funny things to men," which is and she's not even aware of the war.
Then she says, "I will say that Edward has more spark and character and imagination one fingernail than Herman Bloom has in his body." To which he says, "One dead fingernail." And she says, "Right." So it's just amazing that he wants to drag her down in order to make her compliant.
Yeah, we're going to need to talk about that. That to me is everything.
It's very, it reminds me of Election. And again, it's not to lambaste Wes Anderson. It's more to just like, it is a Looney Tune in some ways. And Looney Tunes go very far. Like, he is hateful.
I think when we unpack it later, I think it's indicative of what is very strong in the filmmaker spirit of Wes Anderson, and it's also his flaw.
All right,
but
so we'll get to it. But she says, Edward drowned. He says his mom got cancer. She wipes the blood off his head, realizes that it's fake, flips out, kicks him out. Then we cut to Dirk and Max flying box kites at the airfield and get the feeling that we're in the denouement. Like maybe that's that, he's grown a bit, and we see that
the
because
adults have wrapped up. Yeah.
He apologizes about the hand job comment. Right. The thing with Rosemary ended the only way it could, which is that is not going to happen. You get it through your thick skull. And as an interesting side note, he apologizes to Margaret Yang, which does show growth, but then Margaret Yang also comes down to his level in a way, because earlier there was a montage where we saw that she was a truly an A student excelling at and her science project had all this interest. And he says, I thought you sold your science project to the Navy. And she says, no, I faked it. I thought it would work, but it didn't. So I faked it. And I think like they were kind of right for each other. It's cute.
That's the thing is I think it's actually not a bad move, because like taking the wind out of her sails is actually what it's indicative of is this culture of being so good at everything. Like there's a reason Jack of all trades, master of none. That's not unique to Max. It's the fact that he chose to do that life. Margaret also chose to do that life to some extent, so she's not going to be excellent at everything as well. I think that's fine. I've known a lot of these types of kids when I was going through high school in this kind of atmosphere, and it's kind of a true statement about a lot of them. There is like one or two that are just like excellent at everything, but honestly, the majority of people which is a lot of people, because everyone thinks that they're excellent at something and they're trying it on. This is like a very good children's tale. Like I really like what this says to like kind of adult children.
Young people. Yeah. And we can tell he's got his groove back because he tells Dirk, take dictation, please. We're starting. And he says, please. And earlier in the film, he just said, take dictation. So he says, possible candidates for Kite Flying Society.
And we're back on the horse.
And he starts saying a bunch of names, and you notice Margaret Yang's in there. But I noticed that Shoeshine Pickens is in there, which I think is amazing.
That's pretty good.
And then we check in with,
montage.
Everyone makes peace at the barbershop. So we check back in at the barbershop, and this time Bloom is there, and he's been standing there sadly waiting for Max to show up.
Well, we have this motif in the film of Max will invite you, but he will arrive late.
Right.
In fact, in the point of the scene, punctuality is a bit. Max is not very punctual when he sets the date.
So that's why
it's a power
Murray
move
gets punctuality. Yeah.
Yeah, and so he gets punctuality.
But Max came to offer him he has the two Rushmore medals that we saw him wear every time he wore the Rushmore jacket. One was for attendance and one was for punctuality. And he says, I thought we could each wear one.
Like
and you're like,
bracelet.
So it's, the peace between these two characters now. But it is notable that he takes attendance, because if there's one thing about Max Fisher, he always shows up. And then Murray takes punctuality because Max is not punctual. I like that. They go inside. They talk to the dad. Max introduces him to Bloom by, for the first time, saying to someone, he's not like saying, no, this is my dad. He's a barber. And Bert gives him a free haircut.
Which is kind of great because as the disheveled state that he's in, drinking and not really, he just doesn't look good.
Yeah.
You go to a barber and you feel like you suddenly have a new lease on life. And we feel that as he walks out of the shop.
It's kind of weird that it's the same mechanism of how Dirk and he made up. Like they just do it again.
I mean, yeah. It doesn't need to be complex. Max immediately asks him if he's worth 10 million, which he is. I think it's only funny that that's the number because that's what this movie cost to make.
Nice.
Apparently they're going to need all of it though for whatever Max is planning. So then we cut to another montage at Bloom's factory. It starts.
They're working
playing
out,
with each other, having great
drinking
times,
protein shakes.
Yeah, and the aquarium is still on. We see models of the aquarium being built. The kite flying club is in full swing, in full flight, and Max types on a typewriter because it's a Wes Anderson film. Yeah. So, and he's also, we see it lands on an invitation to the groundbreaking ceremony, which Rosemary receives, which we learned the whole point of this aquarium for both of these man-child.
It's still, it turns out we still have to
nothing has changed.
Up, right. Because they're still both obsessed with Rosemary.
Right. Although this one is slightly different because it's also like, we want to apologize. We want you to see us in a different light, but let's let's be real about this. The end goal for both of them is maybe it'll be like the way I still want it to be.
Right.
Which,
we realize
she
as
has
the
said,
audience,
no, I don't want that.
Even after that basic 1, 2, 3 arc of a film, there's a fourth act because they can't let this shit go. So this is sort of the closer. The denouement is very built out in this film. So
it is.
We can tell that Bloom still harbors feelings because he goes, shit, she's not coming. Oh my God, why did I do this? I spent $8 million on this shit.
Right. When we cut to the actual groundbreaking, which is immediately because there's no other scenes that need to exist. Like you said, the movie has been wrapped up. So all it is this one little orphaned kind of plot line, which is this. And so he abandons, he pulls the ripcord, like he's just like, I paid $8 million for this. And Max says, is that all you're willing to spend?
Yeah, you're a quitter, man. And he goes and finds Cross at the new school where she teaches. And he says, it's a shame she didn't come because Bloom built it for you. Do you think Edward Appleby would have done that? And she goes, I think he would have if he had the money. So it's, again, he's like, the only growth here is not that he still wants to force this woman to do what he wants, but he thinks it would be nice if he gifted her to his friend Bill Murray.
Notably and importantly, Olivia Williams says in this scene, I didn't ask for any of this, which is, that's the trump card, baby. Like you listen to that and then you know where it all stands. But we doubled down not double down in sense of the aquarium, but we move on from this. Once again, it seems like Rosemary's reasserted her position and Bloom and Max failed in hoping to rekindle any kind of magic there once was. And they realize it's truly over.
Cut to Max buys 10 sticks of dynamite.
Yeah, exactly. So we're doubling down in that sense. And as he hands over the dynamite to the child,
Dirk,
to Dirk, he grabs a BB gun.
Dirk hands him a BB gun.
He's got one last thing to do at Rushmore. And we don't know it's a BB gun at this point. We think it's a rifle. So this just got real very quickly. But then we learn that he's pumping it up like you pump up a BB gun. So it's not like he's a school shooter. But he is shooting Magnus, the bully, right?
Magnus, he calls him Magnus as a fucking dig.
There's a dig.
Because it's like a generic Scottish name. All right, Magnus.
And obviously he's pissed, but before he gets beaten up again, Max quickly offers him a role in a play. The bully confesses that he always wanted to be in Max's plays, which is very convenient.
We're writing a coming-of-age movie, and I won't belabor this because we do a whole series about that, but this is we are still struggling with the bully arc and what's the moment where we leave the protagonist and the bully and what's their relationship, what's our final word on that. This is such a good one that he always wanted to be in his play secretly.
He liked them,
yeah. They still don't like each other, but he would have liked to have been invited.
It works because he's actually perfect for the play, but
yeah, exactly.
I don't actually like it.
Oh, Abe doesn't like it. All right, that's pedagogy. So we see a sidey shot of all the characters we've come to know. And by sidey shot, I mean like a long dolly shot that's unidirectional, where we're like, it's the bleachers, it's the crowd.
Literally everyone is there. Even the cops who arrested Max.
It's like the end of it's like the end of Seinfeld, the trial. Right. It's everyone that we've come to know and love on this adventure. Miss Cross notably sits by Bloom, and Max.
Well, it's assigned
seated them together. Yeah.
A random comment by one of the audience mentions Max will he'll burn the school to the ground, which is what I kind of like that.
Yeah.
We learned that the play's called Heaven and Hell, and he dedicates it to his mother and Edward Appleby, Rosemary's late husband.
A friend of a friend.
And then it starts in Vietnam. And the production is enormous. Max is in the play as well as a soldier. There's real pyrotechnics and actual flamethrowers. Max has accidentally hit the face with the butt of a rifle.
Flamethrower.
Yeah, it's kind of awesome.
Yeah,
they have like a background that has like a helicopter like going past. That's just like a miniature. It looks fucking great. It's the most expensive play you've ever seen. Yeah.
During intermission, Bloom and Cross have a moment, a coffee and cream and cigarette moment, where they snuzzle each other, and you're like, oh, it's rekindled.
There's possibility, which is not warranted, but whatever.
That's what's happening.
It's love.
Just accept it.
And no, more importantly, I think they take this time to talk about if the play will have a happy ending, which is metaphor.
Is
plays
it
back on?
It's more like wrapping paper, but yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
The play ends. It brings Bloom to tears because, as we heard at the wrestling match, he was in the shit. And
he was in the shit.
So we get the experience. It's like a Saving Private Ryan moment where he's like, "Oh God, this was really impactful." Max, at the end, Max's character asks Margaret's character to marry him at gunpoint, and she says, "You bet I will," and that's how the play ends.
Yeah. After the play, everything is in its quote right place.
Mm-hmm.
Max and Margaret seem together. No one is really after each other. Love is in the air for everyone. Everyone's getting along. And Max asks the DJ to put on a new song, which is like this guitar ditty.
Well, some final glimpses I think that are great, which is Ronnie and Donnie are in military school. That's fitting. Luke Wilson saying to the dad, Bert, I understand you're a neurosurgeon. He says, no, I'm a barber, but a lot of people make that mistake.
Yeah, that's a good line.
Yeah. Yeah.
Margaret and Max share a dance.
And they play that folksy
slow-mo
guitar song.
And then curtains.
Right. And the final shot is normal to slow-mo as they join the crowd and dance. So I guess no one's getting sad, but it's that same technique where it starts normal speed and in the middle it goes slow-mo. And we're like, which is now we can pedagogy this in reverse. Should we get into pedagogy? Pedagogy.
We talk about theme. We talk about symbolism if we want. We just talk about like basically execution as well.
Last in, first out, because I think it'll be quick. I guess I'm not fully clear on, or if I am clear, I don't know if I resonate with what it means that it ends with it going to slow-mo as they dance and stare into each other's eyes after she like romantically takes his glasses off. Because I don't is it good, or do we want the creepy 15-year-old to have a relationship with the teacher, the unhealthy relationship with that? I don't fully know where it lands or what it means. I think
what we're supposed to think in the universe of Wes Anderson's I guess catalog. It really is like it's more of like. It's a platonic ending, right? I think that's what he's hoping.
So you're saying that look they share is a look of mutual respect that peers, understanding that she's a teacher and he's a student.
Understand they can't, but like also at the same time, we don't have to like hate each other or be, make it be awkward, which,
I guess I just don't buy that is earned.
I also think that an answer to this type of thing in this day and age could also just be like, and then they never really talked again because
that's what I mean. That's what would happen. That's the responsible thing for the adult to do. That's what she should do.
That is kind of the responsible thing. There's other people who could mentor this child. Obviously, he's not the type of person who won't fall in love with a, someone to teach.
It's a classic case of transference where, an adult takes care of you or is nice to you. His mom's dead. You know what I mean? That's conflated with it. She's feeling
a lot of
this.
Yeah. So in a way, like I was saying, I like this film one of the best. And the reason is I think Wes Anderson is really good at writing children. Not in the way that you expect, and that's what kind of is the value of it. But I mean, writing people who don't understand the nuance or have wide visions of the future in a displacement of dysfunction. That is where he truly resides, correct? And if that's true, this is what this film is. It's disillusionment to the fullest. Royal Tenenbaums and other films have characters who are disillusioned. The arc of this film is a simple riff on the concept of Max, this type of person, overreaches, tries to find himself in an impossible situation, is smacked down but finds a way to persevere. And that is kind of the story of grief. It's kind of the story of, bettering yourself.
Growing up.
There's a lot
also.
of going on. And it's so dealing with dysfunction in that way, Wes Anderson is very good at writing those characters as true. The real question comes up in terms of like, now we're getting borderline therapy, right? Where is Wes Anderson always presenting the ending as the best message or lesson to be learned? Well, that's an even more complex question, because A, it's a comedy. So does it really have an obligation to do the truth? But B, is that something that filmmakers have to do anyway? In my opinion, I think that Wes Anderson is very good at these tropes, and he sometimes is a little bit irresponsible in the ways that he presents the ending, like you just mentioned, where like, what is our actual like comfortable end? What is our like home state?
He's like, I don't know. Everyone's together and they're happy.
And he's just like, I don't know. I kind of just want the picture to end this way.
Yeah.
Which is probably my biggest critique of Wes Anderson, is that most of his decisions seem to be determined by, I want it this way.
Well, he also seems to write almost exclusively about characters who, through a combination of privilege and trauma, it coexisting, which they absolutely do and can, creates a state of arrested development. And I don't just bring that up because I mentioned the show before, but I mean literally, like man children, everyone has some sort of developmental block, and it's usually either one or both of like, well, they're in a bubble because they always have been, or there's a defining trauma or some kind of chronic trauma that is, creating the need to not move on yet. And I think it's interesting to also compare it to Raising Arizona, because I want to interrogate myself and whether I would hold, because that's something that's a live action Looney Tune. And I don't know. I don't remember during Coen Brothers, the Raising Arizona episode, us freaking out and going, I mean, if you think about it, they are stealing babies. They took someone's baby. That person had to feel that their baby is gone, And yet, on the other hand, I'm like, right, but I'm not going to take a 15-year-old assaulting his teacher not seriously. And it's not that can't be depicted, again, as we have to say every time. It's that it's depicted whimsically, as if it were a live action.
This is not a cartoon.
Yeah.
This aspires to show us people who are complex and real, and says this could be you, this could be anyone that you see in your life. And that has power. That is power. It's the suggestion of storytelling that happens, that when you want to say, I want to say something real right now. Now you can fake us out. That's fine. Or you can do the Coen Brothers thing where it's like, none of these people are fucking real. But it's this weird mix that he finds that it drums up some things where he nails it sometimes and he doesn't nail it. I also want to, like, a lot of commenters throwing me on the fence. They really love to hate me in this show. Like, there seems to be a little, like, I do respect wholeheartedly Wes Anderson's, like, I have to have respect for the mechanics. There's, like, as a filmmaker, he's very powerful. He's really good. And
especially in this film. This film rips.
And I think this film like, he's hitting, like, the thing that I'm criticizing for the most part is, like, what does he do with his, like, what's the point of his films? Like, what are we resolving to is one thing. And then I have this other, like, characteristically, like, I just don't like his tastes in terms of, like, his, like, the floral,
the aesthetic
on the walls, the aesthetic. But like that is subjective, and I'll try to talk about that less, just because that's the thing that is not, like, who cares. But, there, like, when we talk about it, when he does nail it, he actually does it really well. And in this movie, I really think he does this really interesting thing with the idolation of adults, right? In most cases, people are kind of this subtle, confident in themselves, like they're healthy or they're comfortable in their own skin, and they're also leading an adult life, like dealing with adult things. This is not a character that is typical in a Wes Anderson film. And you get that really through Rosemary in this one. And so they're, in any Wes Anderson films, they're typically the muses. And this one is a literal, like, romantic one. And they're like reminders for all the other main characters, Bloom and Max, really. They're reminders that like they live in this dysfunctional bubble that was established most often by like past trauma or pain, and serves as a kind of like, oh, this woman, she's an aspiration of what we could be. But I do think that while that is true, I think Wes Anderson is making a really, really good point about pointing it out, the nuances of all of this stuff, how he displays grief, how grief connects us. He does do the thing, which also might be true, that kind of aspiration, that looking at her turns into a fetish or an obsession, right? I'd argue for the most part that dynamic exists, and our baggage kind of follows us to the next person as we kind of try to find someone who seems like they're like, I don't know, unaware of it or overcome the baggage in general. It makes us feel safe. But in this movie, Wes Anderson does a really good job of saying Rushmore and Rosemary are like the two things that for both of these man-children, that
one has I think he says, I'm a kid, what's your excuse? Or I broke my nose, what's your excuse? But at least Max Fisher does have the excuse of this is his first coming of age. So I do think he looks better compared to Bloom.
For sure. But he also doesn't like dote on her in the same way that Max does. Like they have two unique problems, but they are both pestering this woman. That's true. We could talk about that all day, but I guess it's just like when you think about grief and you think about like past trauma in everyone's case, because I obviously like with Bloom, it's not that he lost someone, but it's more of that he's unhappy in his, like, he doesn't like his children. He doesn't fit in with his family. He's not loved at home. Like, even though he is divorced, they are divorced because he's cheating. He sees his wife, like, you know, flirting with the pool boy. Who knows what that whole story is.
Tennis coach, it looked like.
People who are in that kind of dysfunctional relationship with themselves sometimes do make monoliths out of someone who is comfortably like taking, like, that's why they idolize them. So I think that is really poignant, and Wes Anderson's really on point with that. Is he's actually saying all the things that we are saying negative about Max, like, oh, look at this, like, pestering, oh, look at this, like, this fucked up 15-year-old. How dare he? He does
treat them as negative.
That's what he's saying. That's what Wes Anderson is saying. He's
but
like,
in the same way as Bottle
up.
Rocket, it just feels like boys will be boys, and sort of letting him off the hook fairly easily, given the subject matter and the themes. That's all. In the same way that Bottle Rocket felt like, and I did a show called Vonnegut, so obviously I like Kurt Vonnegut, but on that show we constantly talked about how as much as great and insightful as Vonnegut is, he had inborn prejudices and, more importantly, negligences around a woman's point of view, or any kind of feminine point of view.
Right.
And just letting that be what it needs to be to make the plot work for the men, or being fridging it a bit, as the kids say. So I just think that's there, but I think it does speak to the aesthetic. I think the aesthetic supports sort of the philosophy, which is clean, simple, nice presentation of ideas, as well as like the look itself. Because the reason it feels like a live action Looney Tune is how straightforward and clean I think some of the arcs of thought are. Like, for example, they're at the end when they have that final conversation, two things. One, it's very clean and straightforward for him to literally say, he says, no one got hurt, at least. And she says, well, except for you. And he says, I didn't get hurt that bad. Very good, clean encapsulation of, you can argue whether it's earned or not, but it's very clear and simple and punctual of going, that's not what he would have said at the beginning of the movie, right? That's growth. He did it.
That's growth.
Or
he did it.
He at least is saying in this moment the right thing.
Right.
And that's very powerful. And I think it ties interestingly to the fact that in that conversation, like on the visual plane of that conversation, the characters are being short framed for the first time, which in this context made it feel to me like the goal was to eliminate the space between them and make it almost seem like they were about to kiss, which is a weird vibe to me to end on. So even in that final like moment, at the same time, I sort of felt that tension. So I think I'll be really interested to track it as a theme of Wes Anderson's work, if indeed there's something there, or if I'm just
I think there
clutching
is
my pearls.
something,
I don't know.
I actually like. I think it comes into at least the first thing that I thought when I was like thinking about this section is that like when Wes Anderson is good at writing children or people who don't understand the nuance of like what they can't read the room, or their wide vision for the future obscures them to thinking about other people. Yeah, where they're just like, you're not thinking with the rest of us, or you're not thinking about other people. I think he's almost always dialed into the truth of those people. Like he knows and can read that. And I think to some extent, from the,
and I think he knows grief
the director
and trauma
himself. Yeah. Anderson confirmed that Max is semi-autobiographical. Now he's talking about his tendency to, as a child at 15, write school plays. He does mention that he wasn't shy, but he does feel like he really applied himself in these kind of schools. And I think that autobiographical probably extends to the fact that he was, he's kind of in a way mercurial about things. In the same way that Max is. I think that there's probably truth there. Maybe Wes Anderson wouldn't necessarily say that in interview, but if he's already saying he's semi-autobiographical, I wonder what extent that leads to. I think that, there's a lot to be said about Wes Anderson finding that truth and presenting a picture of these people as really, really like they ring true to us because he's experienced it. At least once again, returning to the fact that I had experience a lot like this. And I've had multiple times teachers who are like, we all have had teachers where we kind of go under their wing, and you kind of idolize them. He's really nailed that here. And I think that that's a testament to his quality as a director.
And it's interesting to me, even on the aesthetic level, that you don't vibe in some way, because one of the recurring shots in this is when people read books, letters, various like scraps of paper, it's a POV center punched of their, famous Wes Andersonism at this point, but of like the hand holding the letter, and it's perfectly framed up like it would be if you were looking at it in like a first person video game. And to me, that the thought behind that is very similar to trying to refresh the way that computer interaction is presented. And that's a problem we're working on right now. I know you have interesting thoughts about that kind of run along those lines.
Yeah. There's this idea in this film of recommissioning the past. And there's also, which I want to talk more about in a different way, this idea of presenting things in kind of an auteurship or as a proscenium or a theater of like, we are being presented a facade.
Right.
I think they both go hand in hand when it comes down to, when we start to think about like what aesthetic Wes Anderson chooses in almost all of his films. Are they tied to his form? Are they tied to his content? Or are they just style? This one is really, there's a lot of unity in Rushmore, because when you look to if you ask me to describe Wes Anderson's style, obviously we can think of a lot of images and stuff like that, but honestly, I've studied enough film that I can boil it down to you if you know the terms enough and just say he is a French New Wave filmmaker. He makes films like French New Wave. His editorial style, his framing, there's a lot of stuff that he does that. And when you look back at French New Wave, if you know nothing about French New Wave, this is what it essentially was. It was this movement within the younger filmmakers and the auteurship of the 60s and 50s, really, or built in the 50s, of this concept of self-identification. And then in the later films of French New Wave, it was more of like cultural identification. But at the beginning, it was always about self-identity. Name a fucking Wes Anderson film that isn't about that, right? It's always about who am I and the conflict resides in how do I become better. And that's something that in our Bottle Rocket episode, I think we were hard on Wes Anderson for saying that he was like not genuine in it because he didn't seem to take it seriously, because he was doing like a Coen Brothers type thing where he was kind of making his characters as cartoons. This is the first step that we see in Wes Anderson's career where he's like, I'm going to make real people that, yes, they can dip into cartoon like vibe, but ultimately like this guy has real trouble. He's got real sadness in him. And like, let's actually,
so I was going to say, I think ultimately that also defines him he loves to tell the story of healing from trauma, not in a way where you are fully healed from it, but the way that trauma impacts who you are and your identity, and but not letting your trauma overwhelm you and become your entire identity, synthesizing it into your identity and becoming a new person and moving on from that point.
Right.
That's a journey that a lot of Wes Anderson's characters go on.
And so kind of continuing that thought, we get this introduction of, in this film, something that's even more interesting, because of the framing device that he uses. As a visual strategy, he uses the stage or the stage curtains.
Right.
But in all films, like as you were saying, in all films of Wes Anderson, he kind of has this proscenium outlook. Everything looks positioned as if it's like a dollhouse or a cutaway or something like that, right?
Or it could be a school play. Yeah.
Or it could be a school play. So when Anderson presents his action, I forget who said it, but there was someone who was like saying that there was these, the theme of mourning and the frame theatricality kind of parallel each other, because the idea of reenacting and repeating the traumatic is like the style. It's kind of what this is all about. It's kind of like what Max is all about, is that he's redoing the same thing over and over and over, going through the motions, but like doing it in the way that he wants is something that is key to mourning and getting over this idea of grief. So this film, in a lot of, like, I think that's a smartly put kind of thing, is that the idea that we're watching this as like a movie within a movie gives Wes Anderson the distance that he needed as kind of an auteur to present these things as kind of like, okay, this is actually a movie about mourning. And I think it is. I think that he could have done it more and it probably would have been even better, but it's definitely there that you can explain away all the idiosyncrasies and the kind of like, I don't know, fucked upness that is Max and Bloom.
The mom's absence is a thing.
By charting it back to their initial like unresolved traumas.
There are various things, but in his case, the mom's absence, like you say, more scene work could have been attributed, assigned to that, or supported that. It felt like, if you really wanted to drive that home, but it is there. And if you want to go back and think of it through that lens of, well, this kid lost his mom at age 7. Oh, that explains a lot of why he is the way he is. We don't really delve into that because the movie's very present and very like just going, synthesis of time and place. We're here, it's now, let's watch what's going on, as if it were a school play, as if it were something happening in real time. But at the same time, the dots are there. You just have to connect them. And I think that makes it very, very strong.
Right. All these extracurricular activities that we see that he does, they're all specifically ones that have moments where you have a presentation and you show yourself to society as, this is what we are. We're beekeepers. And here's our beekeeper shit.
Right.
And
what is coming of age or that age, but not trying to reach out, grab things and cobble together an identity and be like, this is my identity. Like, he's literally going through building identity.
So grief is one of the things that it's like will cause you to, I know from like, for my experience, it's one of those things that causes you to say, what is your coping mechanism? Mm-hmm. Well, the process of, doing that, I am not one thing. I can't say if I'm like he's in debate class. I'm not a debater, but I will go through the motions of forming a place for everyone else to like enjoy that or whatever, if they need to. My the thing that I love is the creating of that space, and that's kind of what Max is doing. He's creating new spaces for other people to, deal with their shit.
It's gonna grow up to be a social media manager.
Oh God, I don't even know what this character would do with social media. It's terrifying.
Yeah, it's a nightmare. Bunch of viral gaslighting shit that you wouldn't even know is advertising somehow.
But there's a real intimacy, a real proximity to these characters, I think, that happens. Mm-hmm. And it's the first time, definitely more so. Bottle Rocket had flashes of it, but this is the first time when we see his actual execution. The camera angles, the framing, the shot scales, just the stilted performances, not in a bad way. The sound cues that you noticed.
Bill
all the
Murray
disciplines
sprinting into the distance suddenly.
Yeah. He also all that stuff is like basically showing we get closer to the characters with these things. These strategies are done to relate to the characters, and it makes moments like Bill Murray blocking the shit out of a kid even funnier because we feel like we know him more. So it's definitely a step in the right direction in terms of his career. It's one of the better films. I
think it's quite close to being a masterpiece. Do you think it's called Rushmore because rushing is joining a club and he rushes more than anyone else?
No, but I did think for a second that Max, his full name is Max Fisher, mm-hmm. and the idea of a fisher who casts a wide net, and he's Max.
And he's maxing. He's maximum
to
Fisher.
both of the things that we just said. Nah.
All right.
but yeah. Wes Anderson and Owen Wilson wanted to create a Roald Dahl children's book. That's what they said that they wanted Rushmore to be, which, that kind of scans. Roald Dahl is known for the introspection of children. His tales are a lot more personal and a lot more internal than most children's fables. He kind of took fables and ran with it in the same way. Rushmore is definitely a coming of age film where you got the bullies, you got the awkward dealings with sex, the overreaching character who thinks he has too much confidence. These are all things that are mainstays of that tradition or genre. Roald Dahl is kind of the same, just for a slightly younger audience.
Yeah.
What else?
I half see it and half don't. But that's all I got for pedagogy.
Yeah, I think that should be fine.
Unless you have any good boarding school stories or young boys school. I
think that the chapel scene was very good because that's mm-hmm. very much so my experience. Is you have one person who's listening, who's like, this guy's got the keys to the kingdom, mm-hmm. and just the idea that they kind of regularly have them is a silly thing. The aesthetic of wearing the school colors is very funny to me, wearing the uniform, because I also didn't go to a place where you had to wear a uniform, but kids would dress up and you'd be like, what's up with those kids? Because half of us are in our pajamas, Mm-hmm. So there's just a lot of little funny things like that. All I can say, and the only important thing really to say on a podcast, is I think he went to an academy of some kind. Wes Anderson, he knows, because there's so many small little subtle nuances that are not interesting to everybody that prove he's been there.
Well, BTS says the speech about privilege that Herman Bloom gives at the beginning was inspired by an actual speech given by Robert Wilson, father of Andrew Wilson, Luke Wilson, and Owen Wilson, at their chapel.
And BTS said this, the band.
Yeah, behind the scenes, the band.
Yeah, okay.
Look, I'm pulling from the same page you are, and you know it. I see your Roald Dahl factoid 3 above mine. I did see that,
yeah, there you go.
Should we get into How Do You Do That?
Yeah, let's How Do You Do That?
How did he do that? Which is when we scroll through IMDb's trivia page and see what strikes our fancy.
Or, I also use
Abe has real information from.
No, I don't. I just have like 3 or 4.
I just have other sites.
I do.
But yeah. I've revealed my process, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, good.
But you know, a lot of people know the general idea, but it's cool to note that this was the beginning of a big sea change for Bill Murray. And when he first read the script, he thought it was so fantastic, he wanted to do it for free. He was
and it
really
kind of started his career again.
Restarted, yeah. Very nice to Wes Anderson. Supported him publicly, helped haul equipment. When he said he couldn't afford a helicopter shot, he gave him a blank check, which ended up being $75,000 to cover the helicopter shot.
Damn.
Just wanted the movie to succeed and really, really believed in it. Big champion. So that's cool.
Yeah.
He also seemed to hate everyone, though, because it both says that he found Ronnie and Donnie genuinely annoying and that a lot of his bullshit with them was improvised. But it also says, according to Murray himself, he disliked Jason Schwartzman's personality, but eventually warmed up to him while they worked together.
He also always liked Wes Anderson a bit, but there was a story that I read, I think it was from IMDb, where I liked it that on the first day of principal photography, Wes Anderson was saying his direction to him in I don't know, I just if you want, he was whispering and not really being confident in his direction because he was so awed by Bill Murray, I assume. And then basically Murray had to do a lot of work in order for Anderson to I think he made a speech or something, or he said something to the crew and stuff, building up Anderson so that he could have his confidence. I just like the idea that it's a movie about putting too much stock into your mentors, and in a same way, Anderson is this meek, shy guy who's and Bill Murray, who's larger than life, has to build them up just so that they can work together. It's kind of endearing, kind of shows me what their dynamic was.
This was a heavy resonance between the two Andersons, which we don't always get, which we rarely get. Herman Bloom, Bill Murray, wears the same blue suit throughout the entire film. He just changes his shirt and tie.
You're saying Punch Drunk
just
Love?
Just like Punch Drunk Love, baby. Also, interesting to note, the screenplay to this was written before the screenplay for Bottle Rocket. Makes sense in a lot of ways because it's like a coming of age. Yeah. Truth as a young man.
Yeah. Someone found all of the Charlie Brown references. I think it was Reddit. All the Charlie Brown's Christmas specifically references, which I guess that's something that Wes Anderson has done in multiple films. I didn't know about this trope having watched them, but researching for this podcast has revealed Max's dad is a barber, as Charles Schultz. That was true. Okay. Max flies a kite, which Charlie Brown was often doing. Max is seen with winter caps and carrying plant to which is in a scene with Charlie Brown, Christmas. The beginning of the December sequence is in a barbershop, and the music interlude from the show can be heard playing in the background in a scene. So there's something about Charlie Brown's Christmas that Wes Anderson pulls from for his movies, which is fine. I just think that that's funny. I didn't know about that connection.
Did you already mention the heat thing? Because I didn't realize the dynamite scene.
I did, but yeah, it's at the beginning of Heat.
Is a shot-for-shot remake of shot-for-shot remake. Heat. Yeah.
Yeah, it just decided to throw in... Heat was made... Which is funny because Heat was made in 95. And so this is 3 years later. So when he's filming it, probably it's only been out for 2 years. And he was just like, yeah, let's just do Heat. It's just weird. But I guess it's also what's in the zeitgeist and what would be the funniest thing. Well, Max wants to be a badass. And who's more badass than Val Kilmer in Heat? So
Elijah Wood was considered for the role of Max, which I could totally see. Would have also made sense fine. Schwartzman's he's too great, nice. But yeah.
I think there's a sinister aspect to Schwartzman that he plays perfectly in this movie.
Yeah, not to diminish Schwartzman's
But, star. What would Elijah Wood do? Who knows?
It's part of the Criterion collection. I mean, I'm scraping the bottom of the barrel now. What do you got?
I got nothing else really.
Okay.
Yeah. There's I have a question for you of just a quote. I want to know what you think it means.
Mm-hmm.
There's at one point, it's Bert and Max. It's in the it's in the All Is Lost montage. And Bert says to Max, "It'll happen, Max. It's just you're one of those clipper ship captains. You're married to the sea." And then Max responds, yes, that's true. But I've been out to sea for a long time. What does this mean, and why is it like important? Like,
I think it's just a joke line.
So what's the joke?
Oh, the joke is that he is delusionally saying like, oh, of course I could get any girl I wanted at any time. We both understand this. Mm-hmm. I'm married to my job. That's why I don't have a girlfriend. But I think it's time for me to go ahead and get a girlfriend. You, the audience, realizing the irony that this guy is in no position to get a girlfriend because he's kind of sucks.
He kind of sucks, and he's got to work on himself a little bit. He's also 15. So
right. He doesn't need a girlfriend, strictly speaking, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't really have much more. I think we hit our stride in
when Max fakes a bike crash to get into Miss Cross's bedroom, he plays a song in French about a boy whose mother died like his own mother.
It's a song about a
dead
dying
mother
of cancer?
That's all. I think it's just a song about a dead mother.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay.
That means we're done.
Cool. That's cool, though. I mean, that's, choose a song that fits.
I think we hit our stride somewhere in diegesis, which I think we shouldn't be afraid of.
I'm not afraid of anything.
Okay. I just mean we try to get through diegesis to get to pedagogy, but I do think, and I say this because I listen to Gamefully Unemployed and they're better than us, but it's okay to pause and zoom in on funny moments and make jokes during diegesis. It doesn't have to be wall to wall, making time, getting miles under our wheels.
That's true.
We can do funny laugh 'em ups and bits and chuckles.
I'm just like, why listen to these chuckle fucks when you just watch the movie? But I guess that's also
That's why you inject shit that you couldn't get from just watching the movie, which is our fabulous personalities.
Yeah. It's not our insightful.
Ooh, Spock
reads.
And Cortana are trending, so I have to go masturbate.
Okay. Well, as all Anders' Sons episodes end, Mike's gotta go masturbate.
Ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba. We love you.
Yeah!
This has been a Small Beans endeavor. We're a bunch of pals who make podcasts, sketches, music, web series, and movies. The Beans always have new ideas percolating, so make sure to check us out at patreon.com/smallbeans. That's patreon.com/smallbeans, where you can browse all of our current and past content, see what we've got planned in the future, and learn how your support can help the small beans grow into huge, giant monster beans. If you enjoyed this content module, please like, rate, subscribe, or tell a friend about us. We love you.